my pleasure to welcome you to your first official lesson with Mr. J's Masterpiece Theory. You might be asking yourself, what's with the ladder? Well, today, my friends, we will be discussing the major scale. Oh, Mr. J, how I have waited for this day. Oh yes, I know you have. And indeed, it is here. Yes, it has arrived. Now, tonight when I was changing my light, I thought it would be absolutely spiffing for us to begin our discussion on scales with the origin of the word scale, which of course is scala. Well, for those of you whose etymology is a bit rusty, scala is the Italian word for ladder. And in today's lecture, this ladder will represent the steps of the major scale. The first 5 notes, or the pentachord of the major scale, is do, re, mi, fa, so, fa, mi, re, do. Now tell me, how excited are you? Well then, shall we begin? So, if you read Chapter 5 before today's lesson, you have learned that the major scale is the most common scale used in Western music, and also the happiest. Tonality, the final frontier of music. These are the pitches of the diatonic major scale. Its continuing mission to explore strange new melodic patterns, to seek out new rhythms and new syncopations, to boldly go where no musical term has gone before. Oh, I'm so sorry. Got a little carried away there. I'm excited about this lesson. Anyway, what is tonality, you may ask? Well, tonality, simply stated, is the organization of pitch. Now, in our solar system, we have an organization of planets, the sun being the center point around which the planets revolve. Tonality is similar to this, in that when we think of tonic, or the first note of a scale, as the sun, the other pitches have a certain gravitational pull toward that note. Some notes are further away from tonic, and some are very close and lead very closely to it. The point is, though, that all notes in tonal music have a gravitational musical pull towards a single pitch. For example, Early One Morning, an English folk song, starts on F, ends on F, and this melody surrounds or has a gravitational pull towards that note, tonic, which is F major. Here it is. Ba-dum-bum-bum-bum. That C wants to lead back, so, do, back to do, on the downbeat of measure 5. The second half of this phrase, so the second phrase of this melody, hearing the E lead to the F, T, do. So the melody is surrounding F, leading us to that point. So, all melodies are structured around a single pitch, the tonic note, as we mentioned earlier. So those melodic structures, or those melodic patterns, are based on a specific scale pattern, which in the intro, as we learned, comes from the word scala, which means ladder. Any group of pitches that are scalar pitches, scalar patterns, are most often arranged in ascending and descending patterns of steps, similarly to a ladder, moving up or down by step. And those are half steps and whole steps in different combinations. The combination of the whole and half step patterns determine the type of scale. There are many different types of scales. The type of scale, or the mode of the scale, the color of the scale, determines the color of the melody on which that scale is based. So when we have scales, they're the building blocks of tonal music. Now, in Middle Eastern music, we have numerous types of scales, and in India, South Asia, those are called ragas. The Bhairav raga sounds like this, the C, D flat, E, F, G, A flat, B. It has a very Middle Eastern sound to it, and therefore the music that is based on that scale is going to have a certain color to it as well. Now, if you've had some previous music theory experience, you may have noticed that the Bailawal scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, has a resemblance to our Western C major scale. So some of these scales, and the Asavari scale similarly, has a very similar and exactly the same patterns as our natural minor scale. So some of them are going to sound more Western, and some of them are going to sound more Middle Eastern. And that will determine the color of the melody. Now, Western music is usually based on one of two types of scales, the major scale or the minor scale. Obviously, one is meant to sound happy and the other sad. If I was to play a melody, Mary Had a Little Lamb, in a major scale, C major, now, if I was to transpose that melody to a minor key, oh, the poor lamb, and now the lamb is dead. It changes the color of that scale. Now, what is Western music? Oftentimes, we refer to Western music as classical music, say, the music of Mozart. However, the branches of Western music have extended well beyond that of the 18th century classical styles. We have Elvis Presley, rock and roll music.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, you're crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog.
Or musical theater. Wicked is an example of a very popular musical. This is in a minor scale. There's much more dissonance than that of Mozart or Elvis, but it is still tonal music. Even Katy Perry is an example of tonal music. Obviously, this style sounds much different than the ones previous, but it is still tonal music. It is music in which one note is the most important.
Drifting through the wind, wanting to start again. Do you ever feel so paper thin, like a house of cards, one blow from caving in? Do you ever feel?
So the tonality or the tonal structure is all the notes are moving towards, have a gravitational pull towards the tonic note, the home note, in all cases. Now, when you look at all the notes that we have in music, we have not just the white notes on the piano, but we also have black notes as well. When we use all half steps, ascending sharps or descending with the flats, we get all the notes in the chromatic scale. The chromatic scale meaning all chromatic half steps, C to C sharp, D to D sharp, E to F, the naturally occurring diatonic half step, and then F to F sharp, G to G sharp, and so on and so forth. As we come down the scale, we flat, B to B flat, chromatic half step, A to A flat, and we get this sound. So those are ascending and descending chromatic scales starting on C. Now, the chromatic scale actually seldom functions as a musical scale in music. Its purpose, however, is to color or flavor a musical melody. If we just use all of the notes of the diatonic scale, that is, the notes that are in the key signature, music would be very boring and bland, similar to a vanilla ice cream cone. Of course, all of us would prefer the one on the right, that has more flavor, more color, more interest. The chromatic scale, the notes of the chromatic scale, allow us to play with some of those colors and flavors in our music. One of the most important aspects of tonality, the structure of pitch, is to understand the relationship of the pitch to each other within the scale and within a melody. So most scales are made up of whole steps and half steps, but some scales have intervals, that is the distance between notes, that are larger than that of a whole step or a half step. For example, the pentatonic scale, on which a lot of music is based, most musical folk styles. even some Eastern music, Japanese music, Chinese music, uses that as the pentatonic scale. Today, however, we are going to be focusing on the elements of the major scale. Now, the major scale has interval patterns of 5 whole steps and 2 diatonic half steps. However, those half steps must occur in the same place for every major scale. They're always between the 3rd and the 4th notes, and the 7th and 8th notes, or the octave. So in a C major scale, they occur here between E and F. As we've discussed, that is one of our 2 naturally occurring diatonic half steps. And then B to C. So between 3 and 4, and 7 and 8. So in C major, we can create this half step, whole step pattern without using any black keys on the piano, due to the naturally occurring diatonic half steps between E and F, and those between B and C. Now, the most important aspect of the major scale is the relationship between G and C, or the 5th note of the scale and the top note, and the leading tone, the 2nd note from the top, or the 7th scale degree, to the tonic. Those 2 notes will give us that gravitational pull towards tonic, which we call, in this case, C. Because we are in the key of C major, C is tonic. Within our tonal orbit, so to speak, of the major scale, the tonic is known as the home note, or the sun. We think of the tonic as the center point on which we base all of our other notes. So when you listen to a piece of music, you will hear in tonal music a natural aural, or sound-based, gravitational pull towards that tonal note, or the tonic note. The center of gravity, in this case, is C in C major. And you're like, wait, Mr. Johnson, you didn't finish the chord. Well, that's the point. When you're hearing that gravitational pull towards tonic, most musicians get driven crazy if I don't give them that C chord. They hear that G, and they need it to resolve sometime. And yes, it will eventually resolve back to C. As you all take a sigh of relief. That is tonality, the gravitational pull towards tonic. Now, of course, music isn't always in the key of C. I see, you say. Ah, yes. Well, in G major scale, it's the same half note and whole step patterns that we have. It just starts on G instead of C. So whole step between G and A to B is another whole step, and then there we have the half step between scale degrees 3 and 4. B to C, still a naturally occurring diatonic half step. However, as we go to the top part of the scale, D, E, F, this would be 5, 6, and 7. We have to have a half step between 7 and 8, between T and Do. That is not a half step, because that is not the naturally occurring diatonic half step. It occurs here between the 6th and 7th notes of the scale, so therefore we have to raise the F to F sharp, and then we get the same type of scale. Leading tone F to G. So that would be our G major scale.